Now recording, and you're welcome to start whenever you like.
Okay, perfect. So hi, I'm Nisha. I am a first year chemical engineering PhD student at University of Strathclyde. My project is on biocomposite design for sustainable food packaging, and I'm specifically looking at this polymer here, polyhydroxybutyrate. So my research is specifically focused on films, just because for rigid plastics like PET, there's already quite successful methods of recycling that, but films are pretty problematic. According to the UK Plastic Pact annual report, flexible plastics such as films make up a quarter of all UK plastic, but only 6% of these are recycled. And so a lot of films are technically recyclable, like polyethylene, but they end up in landfill anyway for a number of reasons, such as contamination with food. So most of these flexible plastics are single-use food packaging films. So if a piece of film has been in direct contact with food, there's not many people that would, or not everyone's going to spend the time cleaning them before they recycle. There's a lot of confusion with consumers over recycling labels, just because there are a lot of different labels out there. Someone might see this curly arrow and think that they can put it in their household recycling along with rigid plastics, but that's not the case. You've kind of got to read the whole thing, and usually you've got to take your flexible plastics to a kind of bigger supermarket where they can be recycled. There's a real lack of local authorities that will actively collect, sort, and recycle films. There's hardly any in the UK. So yeah, that can lead to, if people don't want to collect them and take them to a supermarket, then they just end up getting binned. And there's a lot of limitations in the current recycling infrastructure, which can prevent films getting widely recycled. So it can be difficult because the nature of films, they're like lightweight and they're flexible. It can be quite difficult to sort out films from, say, a paper stream, which is also lightweight and flexible. So yeah, it can cause a lot of issues in sorting, and also films can accumulate around the moving parts of machinery. So sometimes it's just a lot. It's just a lot of faff trying to recycle films. So plastic packaging for food is really important for reducing food waste and ensuring food security. If we package our food in plastic, then less will be damaged in transit on its way to the stores, and also it can extend its shelf life, make it fresher for longer in the fridge after it's been bought. So one study that I looked at found that wrapping a cucumber in just 1.5 grams of plastic can extend its shelf life by up to 11 days. So even though there is this kind of war on single-use plastic, it is important to acknowledge the benefits that food packaging brings. So I was just going to go for a little bit of polymer chemistry just before I go into my polymer specifically. So it's the free volume in between these polymer chains and the movement of these chains that allows small molecules to diffuse through a plastic layer. So small molecules usually being oxygen, CO2 or H2O. And so packaging that's made of like glass or metal will usually give a much longer shelf life, just because glass and metal don't have the same free volume in its structure, and the material can't move as well as plastic can. So that's why glass and metal packaging are they'll give a much longer shelf life. So we can improve the shelf life of food by trying to minimize the movement of small molecules through the material. So when plastic forms like a more ordered structure, you can get these little crystalline regions in it. And these crystalline regions will act as a barrier for small molecules. And this leads to longer diffusion paths. So imagine this is a film, then if we've got more crystalline content in it, then it will take longer for oxygen to diffuse through and kind of provide a better shelf life. As well, if the the crystallites or filler particles that we can add to induce crystallinity, if they are more structured, like in the previous one, they're all kind of randomly placed facing different ways. Here, they're all facing the same way. There's more order to it. This makes an even longer diffusion path, so it takes longer for these molecules to diffuse through. And so greater orientation gives longer diffusion path, and this leads to better shelf life of the food that's contained inside. So the dispersal of filler particles is important too. So you want to be able to control the distribution of these particles to improve the barrier properties of the polymer. And so this is a polymer that I'm looking at. It's called polyhydroxybutyrate, which I'll just refer to as PHB. And it's made up of lots of repeating units of this monomer here. Normally it's found with like hundreds and hundreds of these monomers joined together. So PHB is a biodegradable polyester. It's produced by bacteria through fermentation of biomass. And bacteria will naturally generate this polyester as an energy storage chemical, so that when their food source runs low, they can break down this chemical to get energy. PHB is great because it is totally biodegradable, even in seawater, although it does take longer. So most of the common sort of compostable plastics that are on the market just now are, they're compostable, but they're not necessarily biodegradable. So they kind of need to be got to put them into like a food waste bin for them to be sent to an anaerobic digester for them to completely break down. And that's normally, under really controlled conditions, whereas PHB will just decompose naturally in the environment. It's made from renewable resources, so it's produced from biomass, which is completely renewable. You can just generate it again. It can also be made from any sort of waste stream that's high in sugar and starch. So compared to, conventional plastics, which are made from oil that's taken out of the ground. So it's really, bio-derived and renewable. It has naturally high crystallinity of about 60%, and that high crystallinity gives it good barrier properties like we just saw in the previous slide. Optical properties, you can see this is a PHB film that was made by a chemistry postdoc at Strathclyde, and you can see it's pretty transparent, which is really important for films, because people are more likely to buy a product if they can actually see through it and see the food inside. And the biodegradation products of PHB are found naturally in the human body. So you can see that PHB is biocompatible and it's non-toxic, which means it can actually be used in like medical implants and like surgical stitches and stuff, where they're just going to kind of break down naturally and not pose any threat to health. So PHB was manufactured at a sort of pilot plant scale back in the sort of 1980s and 90s. It was made by a British chemicals company called ICI, and it was this German hair care brand, Wella. They actually trialled PHB, sold under the brand name Biopol. They trialled that in a range of their shampoo bottles. They also made these disposable razors out of it. But because some of the properties of PHB kind of need improved, they actually made comonomers. Sorry, they added this comonomer HB. So instead of just PHB, it was PHB. So they had to add small amounts, kind of like, maybe 5 to 20% of this comonomer, just to improve some of its properties and make it a bit more flexible and a bit more durable. But so even though it performed well as a product, they stopped manufacturing it about like 10 years later, just because it was so much more expensive to produce compared to conventional plastics. So yeah, PHB does have its limitations. Some mechanical properties need improved. For example, it becomes quite brittle at low temperatures. So PHB has what we call a glass transition temperature of about 5 degrees. So if you put it below 5 degrees, it becomes sort of less rubbery and more glassy. So in terms of food packaging, that means if you had a pure PHB film and you wrapped your food in it and put it in the fridge, then it's likely that when you go to take it out, it might just snap. So that's why we can add things like plasticizers or other types of monomers to improve that. Thermal decomposition. So when they're making plastic into products, you've got to heat it to really high temperature for like melt processing, and so it can be blown and shaped into different bottles and different structures. But when you take PHB to a high temperature, it can start to decompose. So there's a kind of fine line between the melt processing temperature and the thermal decomposition temperature. It's also, it's a lot more expensive than like polyethylene or polypropylene. And it's not got great resistance to acids and bases. So again, if we're talking food packaging, it might mean if you were to wrap a lemon with a PHB film, then it might start to corrode the plastic, which we don't want. So it's got a lot of potential, but it does have a lot of things that need to be addressed before PHB becomes more mainstream. So I am specifically working on right now, anyway, molecular simulations, which are great because they can provide a link between theory and the experimental work that's going on at Strathclyde at the moment. And so I've been spending quite a bit of my time just making a working model of this polymer. So I've finally got one working, and I'll actually just, I can show you. So here we've got a straight chain. This is how I built the model initially. I got one monomer, and then I just placed each monomer next to it in a chain. And if we start the simulation, you can see its natural tendency is to coil up into this sort of coiled, it's a lower energy, it's more relaxed structure. So this is how it performs in simulations at the moment. And it took me a while to get this thing working, but now this is going to be my starting point for a lot more simulations where I can actually get some meaningful data about this polymer and how it behaves and its microscopic structure. So that's where I'm at the moment. For future work, oops, sorry, it's not playing. Sorry, bear with me. Okay, there we go, future work. So right now I've managed to simulate one PHB chain in a box, but to get any sort of meaningful data, I've got to simulate well, I want to be able to produce an amorphous melt. So the amorphous part is this sort of colourful spaghetti-like system in the background here. And to do that, I have to place lots and lots and lots of those chains into a simulation box and run it at a high temperature just to see how an amorphous melt behaves. And then after that, I would like to be able to create a model of the crystalline structure of PHB. So when PHB crystallizes, it forms this like helix shape. So I'm hoping that I can take these sort of bond angles and stuff that are given that have been found through experimental work, and I can hopefully model this crystalline helix, and then I can see how PHB behaves both as an amorphous system and as a crystalline system. Because when it's used in food packaging, it'll have to be in the sort of crystalline state. But when it's being processed, it will be in a melt. And then eventually, so my kind of longer term plan, once I've managed to model both of these types of systems, then I want to think about adding things like plasticizers, which they will kind of expand the volume in between chains, and this can give it more flexibility. So I'd like to be able to add a plasticizer to the system, and then also some filler particles, which will promote the growth of crystals in the structure. So that's hopefully going to happen in the next, probably the next year, to be honest. But yeah, I'm hopefully going to be able to get a lot of information about the microscopic structure of PHB and how the chains behave under lots of different conditions. So yeah, that's me.